The plane was already breaking apart when it hit the river flames, tearing through metal screams, swallowed by the water. People ran. No one looked back. But Zuriya Okeke, barefoot and shaking, ran toward it. Through smoke and burning debris, she saw him, an unconscious man, trapped, half-submerged, sinking with the wreckage. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his worth. She only knew he would die if she walked away. So she didn't. By morning, the river was quiet again. But her life was not, because 5 black Cadillacs were already on their way. Before we go on, tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? And if stories like this move you, take a second to subscribe. Zuriya Okeke woke before the sun rose, as she always did. In the dim blue light of early morning, the air in Makoko carried the smell of damp wood, river water, and smoke from cooking fires that never truly went out. Her small wooden shack creaked as she pushed aside the thin curtain that served as a door. The river stretched endlessly before her, quiet, now almost innocent, as if it had not swallowed pieces of a burning plane just hours ago. For a brief moment she stood still. Her body ached. Her arms still trembled from the weight she had dragged through the water the night before. Her palms were blistered. There were cuts along her legs she didn't even remember getting. And yet none of that frightened her as much as the memory itself. The flames, the screams, the man. Zuriya swallowed hard and looked back inside. On the worn mat in the corner lay her younger brother, Kelechi, curled into himself under a thin blanket. His breathing was uneven, soft, but strained. Even in sleep, his small body seemed to fight for comfort it rarely found. She walked over quietly and knelt beside him. "Kelechi," she whispered, brushing his forehead gently. He stirred, eyes opening halfway. "Sister, you're back. I never left," she said softly, forcing a smile. That was a lie. But it was the kind of lie she told every day, the kind meant to protect him from a world that gave them nothing. "Did you sell the fruits?" he asked weakly. "Not yet," she replied. "But I will. Today will be better." Another lie. Kelechi didn't answer. He simply nodded and drifted back into sleep, his fragile body surrendering again to exhaustion. Zuriya stayed there for a moment longer, her hand resting on his shoulder. She watched him breathe, counting each rise and fall, like it was something she could hold on to, something she could control. But she couldn't. The truth was simple and cruel. Kelechi was getting worse. The cough that had started weeks ago had deepened. Some nights he struggled to breathe. Other days he couldn't even stand. The clinic in the nearby district had told her he needed proper medication, tests, treatment she couldn't even pronounce, let alone afford. She had nodded politely when the nurse explained. Then she had walked away with nothing. Zuriya stood up slowly, her chest tightening as the weight of it all settled back onto her shoulders. There was no time to think. There was only time to survive. By the time the sun climbed over the horizon, Makoko was alive. Voices echoed across the wooden walkways. Children ran barefoot between houses built on stilts. Traders shouted over one another, competing for attention, in a place where everyone was selling something, but no one had money to spare. Zuriya balanced a tray of fruits on her head, bananas, oranges, and a few bruised mangoes she had managed to buy cheaply the day before. "Fresh fruits," she called out as she walked carefully along the narrow planks. "Sweet oranges, buy one, take 2. Most people didn't even look at her. Some shook their heads, others pretended not to hear. She kept walking anyway. This was her life. Invisible until needed, ignored until convenient. As she reached the edge of the busier market area, a voice cut through the noise. "Zuriya." Her steps slowed. She knew that voice. She turned, and there stood Mama Bisi, her wide frame wrapped in bright patterned fabric gold earrings catching the sunlight. Her expression was already sharp with irritation. "You think you can hide from me," Mama Bisi said, crossing her arms. Zuriya adjusted the tray slightly on her head. "Good morning, Mama Bisi." "Don't greet me like that," the older woman snapped. "Where is my money?" Zuriya lowered her gaze. "I told you, I just need a little more time. My brother is sick. I had to." "I don't care about your brother," Mama Bisi interrupted harshly. "You borrowed from me. You pay me back, I will," Zuriya said quickly. "I promise." "Just promise," Mama Bisi laughed bitterly. "You people always promise. Poor today, poor tomorrow." A few nearby traders turned to watch. Zuriya felt their eyes on her. The heat of it burned deeper than the sun above. "I'm trying," she said quietly. Mama Bisi stepped closer, her voice lowering but more dangerous. "Trying doesn't feed me. Trying doesn't return my money." Zuriya tightened her grip on the tray. "Please," she whispered, "give me one more week." For a moment there was silence. Then Mama Bisi's eyes flicked to the fruits. Without warning, she reached up and grabbed one of the oranges, squeezing it hard before tossing it to the ground. "Your fruits look like this," she said coldly. "Bruised, worthless." Zuriya's breath caught. Before she could react, Mama Bisi struck the tray. The fruits tumbled, scattering across the dusty ground. Bananas split open, oranges rolled into puddles. Mangoes landed with dull thuds, already soft flesh breaking further. A gasp rippled through the small crowd. Zuriya froze. For a second she didn't move. Then slowly, very slowly, she knelt down. Her hands trembled as she began picking them up, one by one, ignoring the dirt, ignoring the whispers, ignoring the laughter. "She can't even protect her own goods," someone muttered. What did she expect? Borrowing money without paying back. Zuriya kept her head down. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them away before they could fall. Not here, not in front of them. Mama Bisi leaned closer, her voice cutting like a blade. "Next time I see you without my money, I will take more than your fruits." Zuriya said nothing. There was nothing to say. After a moment, Mama Bisi turned and walked away, her presence leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than noise. Zuriya remained on her knees, her fingers closed around a crushed mango. For a brief second, something inside her cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough to remind her how tired she was, how close she was to breaking. But then Kelechi's face flashed in her mind. His weak smile, his quiet voice asking if she had sold the fruits. Zuriya inhaled slowly and stood up. She gathered what she could salvage, placing the damaged fruits back onto the tray. They wouldn't sell for much now, if at all, but something was better than nothing. It always had to be. As she lifted the tray back onto her head, her arms shook slightly. Still she straightened her posture, forced her shoulders back, and stepped forward again. "Fresh fruits." She called out, her voice softer now but still steady. "Sweet oranges." People passed by. Some glanced. Most didn't. But Zuriya kept walking, because stopping was not an option, because giving up was not a luxury she could afford, and because somewhere deep inside her, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the pain, there was something that refused to die. Hope, even if the world gave her no reason to hold on to it. Far away from the noise of the market, far from the broken fruits and whispered judgment. The river remained silent, but beneath its surface pieces of twisted metal still rested cold, heavy, waiting. And somewhere between that river and the path Zuriya was walking, something had already begun to change. She just didn't know it yet. Miles away from Makoko, far above the restless waters that would soon change everything, Obinna Adeyemi sat in silence. The private jet hummed with controlled precision, its interior wrapped in soft leather and dim ambient lighting designed for comfort. Everything about the space spoke of wealth, quiet, effortless, untouchable, and yet Obinna felt nothing. He stared out the window, watching clouds drift beneath him, like distant thoughts he could no longer reach. His reflection faintly stared back, sharp features composed expression. A man who had built an empire before most men found their footing in life. To the world he was everything. To himself he was empty. "Sir." The voice pulled him back. His assistant Chiamaka Nwosu stood nearby, tablet in hand posture, straight but careful. She had worked with Obinna long enough to recognize the silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind. "We'll be landing in Lagos in about 40 minutes, she said. "The board is ready for the signing as soon as you arrive." Obinna nodded slightly. "The Daramola Group?" He asked, his voice calm, measured. Chiamaka hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "Yes, sir. Their representatives are already at the office." A pause. Then she added, "There's also been another message." Obinna's eyes shifted toward her. "What kind of message?" Chiamaka glanced at the tablet as if confirming something she already knew. "Anonymous. It came through a secured channel. No traceable source." Obinna leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable, and she swallowed lightly before reading. "Some deals are not meant to be completed. Turn back while you still can." The cabin fell quiet. For a moment, the only sound was the steady hum of the engine. Obinna exhaled slowly. "People always warn you before they fail," he said flatly. Chiamaka frowned slightly. "Sir, this doesn't feel like an empty threat. Everything feels dangerous when you're not in control," Obinna replied. "That's why most people never build anything worth protecting." His tone wasn't arrogant. It was tired. Chiamaka studied him for a moment. "Should I alert security?" Obinna shook his head. "No. If someone wants to scare me, they should try harder than a message." Another pause. But something lingered. Even as he dismissed it, the words stayed in the air, heavy, unresolved. Obinna stood up and walked toward the small bar area, pouring himself a glass of water. His movements were precise, controlled. Every action measured. That was how he lived his life. Control, structure, distance. He didn't trust easily, didn't attach easily, didn't feel easily. Not anymore. There was a time years ago when that had been different. Before the betrayals. Before the deals that turned allies into enemies. Before the realization that loyalty could be bought and sold. Now everything in his world had a price. Everything except peace. He took a sip of water, his gaze drifting again toward the window. "Do you ever think about stopping?" Chiamaka asked suddenly. The question caught him off guard. He turned slightly. "Stopping what this?" she said, gesturing lightly. "The constant movement, the pressure, the distance from everything real." Obinna watched her carefully. Most people wouldn't dare ask him something like that. But Chiamaka wasn't most people. "That's a dangerous question," he said quietly. "Why? Because it assumes there's something else waiting on the other side." Chiamaka didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, lowering her voice slightly. "Maybe there is," she said. "Maybe you just haven't looked." Obinna almost smiled. Almost. "I don't have time to look," he replied. The conversation ended there. But the silence that followed felt different. Heavier. Minutes passed. Then suddenly, a slight turbulence. Barely noticeable at first. The plane shifted gently like a breath out of rhythm. Chiamaka glanced up. "Just air pockets," she said, more to reassure herself than him. Obinna remained still, but his grip on the glass tightened slightly. Another jolt, stronger this time. The cabin lights flickered, just once, then steadied. "Sir!" Chiamaka's voice dropped. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some unexpected turbulence. Please return to your seats and fasten your seat belts." Obinna set the glass down calmly and walked back to his seat. His movements remained controlled, but something had shifted. He fastened his seat belt. The plane shook again harder. A distant metallic sound echoed through the structure. Not normal. Chiamaka gripped the armrest, her knuckles turning pale. That didn't sound right. Obinna's eyes narrowed slightly. Now he felt it too. Not fear, something else. Instinct. The kind that didn't come from logic, but from something deeper. The intercom crackled again, but this time the pilot's voice was strained. "We are encountering static," cut him off. The lights flickered again. Then, a loud bang. The entire plane jolted violently to one side. Chiamaka gasped, grabbing onto the seat. What's happening? The calm was gone now. Passengers in the rear cabin shouted. Someone screamed. Obinna's jaw tightened. Smoke. He could smell it. Faint at first, then stronger. "Engine failure," he muttered under his breath. Another explosion closer this time. The cabin tilted sharply. Overhead compartments burst open, bags crashing down. Chiamaka cried out as something struck the floor beside her. "Sir, stay down." Obinna snapped, his voice cutting through the chaos. But even as he spoke, the plane lurched again, more violently than before. The sound of tearing metal filled the air. Outside the window, fire. Flames streaked across the wing, bright against the darkening sky. Chiamaka's breathing became rapid, panicked. "We're going down." "Oh God, we're going down." Obinna reached out, grabbing her wrist firmly. "Look at me," he said sharply. She did. "Barely. Breathe," he ordered, slowly. For a split second, the world narrowed. Just the two of them. Then the plane dropped. Not a dip, a fall. Weightlessness hit. Screams erupted. Everything blurred. The river below rushed up to meet them. Obinna's mind moved faster than fear. Too many variables, too little control. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a deal. This was impact. The plane slammed into the water with a force that shattered everything. Glass exploded. Metal screamed. Cold water surged in, instantly, violent and unstoppable. Obinna's head snapped forward, pain flashing white across his vision. The seatbelt dug into his chest. The world turned sideways, then upside down. Water filled the cabin, dark, freezing, drowning everything. Chiamaka's hand slipped from his grasp. He tried to move, tried to unbuckle, but his body didn't respond the way it should. The pressure, the shock, the noise, then silence, heavy, crushing. The last thing Obinna saw before everything faded was light breaking through the water above. And then nothing, far below the sky that had betrayed him, far beneath the surface that now held him captive. The man who controlled everything had lost all control, and somewhere not far away, someone who had nothing was about to risk everything. By the time the explosion echoed across the river, Zuriya was already running. She didn't remember deciding to move. 1 second she had been standing near the edge of the market, clutching what remained of her ruined fruits. The next, her body had already turned toward the sound, toward the thick column of black smoke, rising into the sky like a warning. No one wanted to answer. People were shouting. "Plane crash. It's falling into the river. Stay back. Stay away." Zuriya dropped the tray. The last of her fruit rolled into the dirt, forgotten. Her feet were already moving. Bare against splintered wood, against rough planks and broken edges, she ran faster than she had ever run before. Her breath came in sharp bursts, her chest tightening, not from fear but from something deeper. Instinct. By the time she reached the riverbank, chaos had already taken over. The water churned violently, thick with debris. Flames flickered across patches of floating wreckage. Pieces of metal jutted out at impossible angles. The air was filled with smoke and the smell of burning fuel. People stood at a distance, watching, pointing, but no one was moving closer. No, no, it's too dangerous! It could explode again. Don't go there, Zuriya stepped forward. The heat hit her immediately sharp and suffocating. Her eyes stung, her lungs protested with every breath. She hesitated, just for a second. Her heart pounded wildly against her ribs. This was madness. She had nothing, no strength to spare, no reason to risk her life for strangers who would never even know her name. She could walk away, just like everyone else. No one would blame her. No one would expect more. But then a sound, faint, almost swallowed by the chaos, a cough. Zuriya froze. Her head snapped toward the wreckage. There, half submerged in the water, caught between twisted metal and sinking debris, someone was still alive. Her body moved before her mind could argue. No, someone shouted behind her. "Girl, don't," but she was already running. And then she jumped. The water hit her like a wall, cold, violent, crushing. For a split second, it stole the breath from her lungs, shocking her entire body into stillness. The heat from the fire above vanished instantly, replaced by a suffocating chill that clawed into her bones. But she didn't stop. She forced her limbs to move, pushing through the resistance of the water, kicking hard, fighting her way toward the wreckage. Debris floated everywhere. Sharp edges brushed against her skin. Something cut her arm. Another piece struck her shoulder. She ignored it. The man. Where was he? There. Zuriya reached him, just as a section of the plane shifted with a deep groan. He was trapped. His body was wedged beneath a bent piece of metal, half submerged, his head barely above water. His face was pale beneath the soot. His eyes closed, his chest unmoving. For a moment, just a moment, fear took hold. He was heavy, too heavy, and the wreckage was sinking. "You can't do this," a voice inside her whispered. "You'll die too." Zuriya clenched her teeth. "I'm not leaving him." She muttered the words, lost beneath the noise of the river. She dove under. The cold swallowed her again, the world turning silent and dark. Her hands searched blindly, feeling along the twisted metal, until she found what held him down. Her fingers slipped, struggling to find grip. She pushed. Nothing. She pushed again, harder. The metal shifted slightly. Not enough. Her lungs burned. Air. She needed air. Zuriya surged back to the surface, gasping, coughing as smoke-filled air scraped her throat. Around her, voices shouted, "She's crazy. She's going to drown. Leave him." She ignored them. Again, she took a deep breath and went under. This time she didn't hesitate. She braced her feet against the wreckage and pushed with everything she had. Her muscles screamed. Her vision blurred. Her chest tightened as her lungs demanded air she refused to give them. "Move!" she screamed inside her mind. The metal shifted. A little more. Then suddenly, it gave way. Zuriya's eyes widened. She grabbed the man's arm, immediately pulling with all her strength as his body came free. He didn't move, didn't react. Dead weight. "No, no, you're not dying here," she whispered, though the words never left the water. Her lungs were on fire now. She kicked upward, dragging him with her every movement, slower than the last. Then light. She broke the surface, gasping desperately, pulling in air like it was the only thing left in the world. The man's body floated beside her, limp, unresponsive. "Help!" someone shouted from the shore, but no one entered the water. Zuriya turned toward land. It felt impossibly far. Her arms trembled, her legs weakened, but she tightened her grip on him and started swimming. Every stroke felt heavier than the last. The current pulled at them, dragging them sideways. Debris bumped into her, slowed her down. Twice she slipped. Twice she almost lost him, but each time she held on. Because letting go meant accepting something she refused to accept. Just a little more, she whispered between breaths. Just a little. The shore came closer. Voices grew louder, shapes clearer, hands reached out, but still no one stepped into the water. Not until Zuriya's feet finally touched the muddy bottom. She stumbled forward, half dragging, half carrying him, until they reached the edge. Then her strength gave out. They collapsed onto the ground together. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe properly. Everything hurt, everything burned. But then, she turned toward him. He lay still, too still. "No," she whispered. Her hands shook as she reached for his face, tapping lightly. "Hey, hey." No response. Her heart pounded wildly. She had seen this before. People who stopped breathing, people who didn't come back. No, Zuriya pressed her hands against his chest. "You don't get to die after I brought you here." She pushed down, once, twice, again. Nothing. Tears blurred her vision. Her body trembled not from cold but from desperation. "Breathe," she cried. "Please, just breathe." She leaned closer, pressing her ear against his chest. Silence. For a split second, the world stopped. Then a sound. Faint. Weak. A heartbeat. Zuriya froze. Then quickly she pressed again, harder this time. "Come on!" she shouted. Another push. Another. Suddenly, he coughed. Water spilled from his mouth as his body jerked violently, dragging in a sharp, painful breath. Zuriya gasped. "He's alive!" someone shouted behind her. Relief crashed over her so hard it almost knocked her down again. She laughed, half sob, half breathless disbelief. "You're not dying today," she whispered, her voice shaking. The man's eyes fluttered slightly but didn't open. He was still unconscious, still fragile, still hers to protect. Zuriya looked around. The crowd had grown. People whispered, watched, but no one stepped forward to help. Not really. She swallowed. Then slowly, painfully, she wrapped his arm over her shoulder and stood up. Her legs nearly gave out. But she steadied herself. One step, then another, carrying him, away from the river, away from death, and into a future neither of them understood yet. Behind them, the wreckage continued to sink. The flames died slowly. The river returned to silence. But something had changed. Because in that moment, a girl who had nothing had just saved a man who had everything, and neither of them would ever be the same again. By the time Zuriya reached her shack, the sky had begun to darken. Each step felt heavier than the last. The man's weight dragged against her fragile strength, his arm hanging lifelessly over her shoulder as she struggled to keep them both upright. Her legs trembled. Her breath came in uneven bursts. More than once she nearly collapsed along the narrow wooden planks that led back into the heart of Makoko. People stared. Of course they did. They always stared when something unusual happened, especially when it involved someone like her. "Who is that?" someone whispered. "Where did she find him?" "Looks rich." Zuriya ignored them. She had no energy left for explanations. All she knew was this: if she stopped moving, he might die. And she had not dragged him out of the river just to watch that happen. When she finally pushed aside the thin curtain and stumbled into her shack, her entire body gave in at once. She lowered him carefully onto the mat, her hands shaking from exhaustion. For a moment she just stood there, staring. He looked different now, away from the water and fire. His clothes, what remained of them, were clearly expensive. Even torn and soaked, the fabric held a quality she had never touched before. His wristwatch, though cracked, still gleamed faintly. His face, though bruised and streaked with soot, carried a kind of quiet authority. This was not a man from her world. Zuriya swallowed. It didn't matter. He was here now, and he was still breathing. That was enough. Kelechi, she called softly. Her brother stirred from his corner, eyes blinking open in confusion. Sister! Then he saw the man. His small body stiffened. Who is that? I found him, Zuriya said simply. He was in the river, the plain. Kelechi pushed himself up weakly, wincing slightly as he sat. Is he dead? Zuriya shook her head quickly. No, but he's not well. She knelt beside the man again, placing her hand lightly against his forehead. Hot, too hot, fever. Her chest tightened. Infection, shock, internal injuries. She didn't know what exactly, but she knew enough to understand one thing. He needed help, real help, the kind she couldn't afford. Zuriya stood up abruptly, pacing the small space as her mind raced. Think. There had to be something. The clinic. But they would ask for money first. Always money. She glanced at the small wooden box tucked into the corner. Everything she had. Everything she didn't have. Her heart pounded. Slowly, she walked over and opened it. Inside were a few crumpled bills, some coin, and a small worn bracelet. It wasn't valuable. Not in the way rich people measured value. But to her it was everything, her mother's last gift. Zuriya picked it up, her fingers tracing the faded beads. For a moment time seemed to pause. Memories flooded back, warm hands, gentle laughter. A voice she hadn't heard in years. You will always have something to hold on to, her mother had said. Zuriya closed her eyes, then opened them again. Her gaze hardened. I'll be back, she said. Kelechi looked at her confused. Where are you going? To get help. The clinic was crowded as always. Zuriya pushed her way through the waiting area, ignoring the annoyed glances, the murmurs of protest. Please, she said breathless. I need medicine. Someone is very sick. He almost drowned. He has a fever. The nurse behind the desk barely looked up. Do you have money? Zuriya hesitated. Then slowly she placed the bracelet on the counter. The nurse's eyes flicked down briefly. Then back up. That's not enough. Zuriya's chest tightened. It's all I have. The nurse sighed, clearly unimpressed. We don't run a charity. He will die, Zuriya said quietly. So will many others, the nurse replied, already turning away. Something inside Zuriya snapped. Not loudly, not violently, but enough. She stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. Then give me something, she said. Anything. I will pay you back, I swear it. The nurse paused. For a long moment she said nothing. Then finally, with visible reluctance, she reached under the counter and placed a small packet on the surface. Basic antibiotics, she said. And fever tablets. That's all you're getting. Zuriya grabbed them immediately. Thank you, she whispered. But the nurse had already turned away. By the time Zuriya returned home, night had fallen completely. Her body felt like it was running on something beyond strength, something fragile, temporary. She pushed aside the curtain and rushed inside. The man hadn't moved. Kelechi sat beside him, watching quietly. He didn't wake up, he said. Zuriya nodded, kneeling quickly. It's okay, she murmured more to herself than anyone else. We'll take care of him. She worked carefully, cleaning his wounds with what little water she had, her hands gentle but precise. She crushed the tablets, mixing them with a small amount of water, then carefully lifted his head. Come on, she whispered. You have to swallow. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, barely, his throat moved. Zuriya exhaled in relief. Good, she said softly. That's good. Hours passed. The night grew deeper. Kelechi eventually fell asleep again, curled beside the wall. But Zuriya stayed awake, watching, waiting. listening to every breath the man took as if each one mattered. Because it did. At some point, her body shifted closer to him without her noticing. Her head leaned lightly against the wall. Her eyes closed. Just for a moment. When she woke again, the room was quiet. Too quiet. Panic shot through her instantly. She sat up, her heart racing as she turned toward him. He was still there, still breathing, but something had changed. His face was calmer. The tension in his body slightly eased. Zuriya leaned closer, studying him carefully. Then a flicker. His fingers moved, just slightly. Zuriya froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, carefully, she reached out. "Hey," she whispered. "Can you hear me?" His brow twitched faintly, a reaction, small but real. Zuriya felt something shift inside her chest. Hope, fragile, dangerous, but undeniable. "You're safe," she said gently. "You're not in the water anymore." His lips parted slightly. No words came, but the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was trying. Zuriya smiled faintly, exhaustion and relief mixing in her expression. "Good," she whispered. "Just rest." She sat back slowly, her body finally allowing itself to relax just a little. Outside, the sounds of the slum carried on as always. Voices, footsteps, life moving forward without pause. But inside that small shack, something had changed. A stranger lay between life and death. A girl with nothing had given everything to keep him there. And somewhere far beyond the reach of Makoko, people were already searching, not for a body, but for a man who could not simply disappear. They didn't know where he was, they didn't know who had him. But they were getting closer. And when they found him, nothing would stay the same. Morning came slowly, like it was unsure whether to disturb what had been fought for through the night. A thin line of sunlight slipped through the cracks in Zuriya's wooden shack stretching across the floor, until it reached the man lying on the mat. Dust floated in the beam, drifting lazily, so calm, so ordinary, as if nothing extraordinary had happened here. But everything had. Zuriya had not slept much. Her body had rested for a few minutes at a time, only to wake again at the slightest change in his breathing. Each rise and fall of his chest had become something she monitored, without thinking, like a silent rhythm she had learned to trust. Now she sat beside him, her back against the wall, her eyes tired but alert. Kelechi stirred in the corner. "Sister," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "Is he still here?" Zuriya nodded softly. "Yes. Is he alive?" Another pause. Zuriya leaned slightly forward, placing her hand gently near the man's neck, feeling for the pulse she had checked countless times already. Still there, still steady. "Yes," she said quietly. "He's alive." Kelechi watched him for a moment, his small face filled with curiosity. "He looks important." Zuriya almost smiled. "Everyone is important," she said. Kelechi frowned slightly, as if trying to understand something too big for him. Then he coughed. Sharp, sudden. Zuriya's expression changed immediately. "Kelechi, slowly," she said, moving toward him. "Breathe." He tried to steady himself, but the cough lingered, shaking his thin frame. Zuriya rubbed his back gently, her touch soft, practiced. It passed, but not completely. It never did. "You should rest," she said. "I'm okay," he whispered, though his voice said otherwise. Zuriya didn't argue. She just nodded and helped him lie back down. Her eyes lingered on him longer than usual. Then she turned back, because there was still someone else who needed her. The man's condition had improved, but only slightly. His breathing was no longer as shallow. The fever had reduced, but not enough. His skin was still warm, his body still weak. Zuriya dipped a cloth into a small bowl of water and wrung it carefully before placing it on his forehead. "You're stubborn," she murmured softly. "You don't want to leave, do you?" No answer. But she didn't expect one. She sat there for a while watching him, studying the small changes, the slight movement of his fingers, the faint twitch near his eyes. Signs, tiny signs, but enough. Hours passed. The world outside continued as always, voices rising and falling, footsteps echoing across wooden paths, life moving forward without pause. Inside the shack, time moved differently, slower, more careful. Then a sound. Zuriya turned immediately. A low, strained breath, different from before. Her heart skipped. She leaned closer. "Hey," she whispered. "Can you hear me?" His brow furrowed slightly. His lips parted. Air moved, but unevenly. Zuriya's pulse quickened. "You're okay," she said gently. "You're safe. Just take your time." His fingers twitched again, stronger this time. Then slowly, very slowly, his eyes opened. Only a fraction, but enough. For a moment, they didn't focus. They moved slightly, unfixed, searching. Then they landed on her. Zuriya held her breath. "Good," she said softly. "That's it. Stay with me." His lips moved. No sound came out. She leaned closer. What? Another attempt. Still nothing. Frustration flickered across his face, brief but real. Zuriya shook her head, gently. "Don't force it. You've been through a lot." His eyes stayed on hers. There was confusion in them, deep, unsettled. "Do you know where you are?" she asked. A pause. Then a barely noticeable shake of his head. Zuriya swallowed. "That's okay," she said quickly. "You don't have to know right now." His gaze shifted slightly, taking in the space, the small room, the worn walls, the thin mat beneath him. Nothing familiar, nothing that belonged to him. He blinked slowly, then winced. Pain. Zuriya noticed immediately. "Easy," she said, placing her hand lightly near his shoulder. "You're hurt." He looked back at her, still confused, still searching. "Do you remember your name?" she asked. Another pause. Longer this time. His eyes narrowed slightly as if reaching for something just out of reach. Then nothing. Zuriya saw it in his expression. The emptiness, the absence, and her chest tightened. "It's okay," she whispered. "You don't have to remember yet." He studied her face, carefully, as if trying to understand why she was there, why she was helping him, why she hadn't left. "You saved me." He managed his voice barely more than air. Zuriya blinked, then shook her head, lightly. "No, I just didn't leave you." A faint silence followed, different from before. He processed that, slowly. "You could have," he said weakly. "Yes," she replied. Another pause. Then quietly, "But I didn't." Something shifted in his eyes. Not fully, not clearly, but enough. Something new. Kelechi watched from his corner, his small face filled with quiet amazement. "He talks," he whispered. Zuriya glanced back at him briefly, smiling faintly. "Yes, he does." The man's gaze followed hers, landing on the boy. For a moment, he simply observed. Then he nodded slightly, an acknowledgement however small. Kelechi smiled back, shy but genuine. "My name is Kelechi," he said softly. The man opened his mouth as if to respond, but nothing came. Zuriya stepped in gently. "You don't have to speak yet." He nodded faintly, then closed his eyes again. Not from weakness, but from exhaustion. Zuriya watched him for a moment longer, then leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly. "He's getting better," Kelechi said. Zuriya hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, he is." But something in her tone was careful, measured, because she knew better than to trust hope too quickly. Later that day, the heat grew stronger. The small shack trapped it, turning the air heavy. Zuriya moved quietly, doing what she could, adjusting the cloth, checking his temperature, making sure Kelechi rested. Time passed. Then, a shadow crossed the doorway. Zuriya looked up. Two men stood outside. Strangers. Their clothes were clean. Too clean. Their posture different. They didn't belong here. "Excuse me," one of them said. "We're looking for someone." Zuriya's body tensed instantly. "For who?" she asked, cautiously. The man glanced at his companion briefly, then back at her. "There was a plane crash yesterday," he said. "We're searching for survivors." Zuriya's heart skipped, just once, but it was enough. "I don't know anything," she replied quickly. The men studied her, carefully. Then one of them took a small step forward. "If you've seen anyone at all, it's important you tell us." Zuriya didn't move, didn't speak. Behind her, inside the shack, the man lay silent, hidden, breathing, waiting, and for the first time since she pulled him from the river, Zuriya felt something new, not fear, not doubt, something else, a decision. She straightened slightly, her voice calm but firm. "I haven't seen anyone," she said. The men held her gaze for a moment longer. Then slowly, they nodded. "All right," one of them said. "If you remember anything, let us know." They turned and walked away. Zuriya didn't move until they were gone. Only then did she exhale. Slow, heavy. Inside, the man's eyes opened again. This time clearer, stronger, and though he said nothing, he had heard everything, and something inside him had begun to change. The men returned the next day. This time they didn't come quietly. Their footsteps echoed across the narrow wooden paths of Makoko, heavier than before, more deliberate. They were not alone anymore. Two had become four. Their presence drew attention immediately. Clean shoes, pressed clothes, eyes that didn't wander like everyone else's. They were looking, and they were getting closer. Inside the shack, Zuriya felt it before she saw it. The shift in the air, the way voices outside changed tone, lower, more cautious. People were watching, whispering. Kelechi noticed it too. "Sister," he said quietly. "Those men, they came back." Zuriya didn't respond immediately. She was kneeling beside the man again, adjusting the cloth on his forehead. His fever had dropped further, but his strength hadn't fully returned. He could sit up now barely, but walking was still impossible. His eyes were open, clearer than before. Aware, he looked at her as she worked, studying her movements, with quiet attention. "You should let them see me," he said suddenly, his voice still weak but steadier. Zuriya froze. Her hand stopped mid-motion. "No," she said immediately. He frowned slightly. "Why?" She looked at him, then really looked at him. "Because I don't know who they are," she replied. "And I don't know who you are." A pause. Fair. He couldn't argue with that. "My name," he began, then stopped. His expression shifted, tightened. Nothing came. Zuriya saw the frustration again, the emptiness. She softened slightly. "It's okay," she said. "You'll remember." He wasn't sure if he believed that, but he nodded anyway. Outside, voices grew louder, closer. Zuriya stood up quickly. "Stay here," she whispered. "Don't make a sound." Kelechi watched her with wide eyes. "Are they bad people?" Zuriya hesitated. "I don't know," she admitted. Then she stepped outside. The four men stood just a few meters away, now speaking to a group of traders. One of them held a photo, slightly damaged, but still visible. Zuriya's heart tightened. Even from a distance, she knew. It was him. Cleaner, stronger, dressed in a suit that didn't belong to this place. The man she had pulled from the river. The man lying inside her home. One of the men turned and saw her. Their eyes met. Recognition flickered, subtle but unmistakable. He stepped forward. You, he said. We spoke yesterday. Zuriya nodded slowly. Yes. He studied her face carefully, then held up the photo. Have you seen this man? Zuriya's chest tightened. She forced herself to breathe, slowly, steady. No, she said. A lie, clear, direct. The man didn't react immediately. He simply watched her, then took another step closer. This is Obinna Adeyemi, he said, CEO of Adeyemi Group. Zuriya blinked. The name meant nothing to her, but the tone did. Respect. Importance. He was on that plane, the man continued. If he's alive, we need to find him. Zuriya said nothing. Behind her, the shack stood silent, still, holding a secret that could change everything. You're sure you haven't seen him? The man asked again. Zuriya met his gaze. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Then I'm sure. Another pause. Longer this time. Then the man nodded slightly. All right. He turned away, but not before giving her one last look. A look that said he wasn't convinced. Inside the shack, Obinna had heard everything, every word, every pause, every lie. He sat quietly, his back against the wall, his body still weak, but his mind clearer than before. Obinna Adeyemi, his name. Hearing it again was like something unlocking inside him. Fragments returned, pieces, a boardroom, a signature, a voice on the phone, the warning. Turn back while you still can. His jaw tightened. Not everything came back, but enough did. Enough to understand one thing. Someone wanted him gone, and whoever those men were, they might not all be on his side. Zuriya stepped back inside, closing the curtain behind her. Her eyes went straight to him. You heard. He nodded. My name, he said quietly. Obinna. Zuriya repeated it softly. Obinna. It felt strange, like naming something that had already been part of her world for days. You're important, she added. He gave a faint, humorless smile. Apparently. She crossed her arms slightly. Then why would someone want to hurt you? Obinna didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was complicated. Because the truth always was. I don't know, he said finally. Not entirely a lie, not entirely the truth. Zuriya studied him, then sighed softly. Well, she said, until we know, you're staying here. Obinna looked at her. You're protecting me, he said. Zuriya shrugged slightly. You're still alive. I'd like to keep it that way. Something in her tone was simple, honest, uncomplicated, and it unsettled him, because nothing in his world had ever been that simple. Later that afternoon, the tension in Makoko grew heavier. Word had spread. Men were searching. Important men. People talked, speculated, watched. And with that attention came something else. Opportunity. Mama Bisi stood at the edge of the walkway, her eyes narrowed. She had seen the men, heard the whispers, and she had seen Zuriya talking to them. Suspicion crept in. Zuriya had nothing yesterday, and today she had something worth hiding. Mama Bisi smiled slowly, not kindly. Inside the shack, Kalechi slept again, his breathing uneven, but calmer. Zuriya sat nearby, her back against the wall. Obinna watched her. You didn't have to lie, he said. She didn't look at him. Yes, I did. Why, that made her turn. Her eyes met his. Because I don't know who wants to help you, she said, and I don't know who wants to hurt you. A pause. Until I know the difference, I choose for myself. Obinna held her gaze. There was something in her words, something he wasn't used to hearing. Control, not over money, not over power, but over choices, real ones. You trust yourself, he said. Zuriya nodded once. I have to. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Not entirely. Outside, the sun began to lower. Shadows stretched across the wooden structures, and somewhere not far away, Mama Bissi watched, waiting, listening, planning, because in a place where everyone struggled to survive, secrets were currency, and Zuriya was about to become very valuable. That night Makoko did not sleep. It rarely did, but this time the restlessness carried a different energy. It wasn't just the usual noise of survival, the late cooking fires, the murmured conversations, the distant laughter forced out of tired bodies. It was curiosity, and something sharper beneath it. Suspicion. Inside the shack, Zuriya sat in silence, her back resting lightly against the wooden wall. The dim glow of a small lantern flickered across the room, casting uneven shadows that stretched and shrank with every movement of the flame. Kelechi was asleep again, his breathing quieter than before, though still fragile. Obinna sat across from her, now propped slightly against a folded cloth. It had taken effort more than his body wanted to give, but he had insisted on sitting up. "I need to understand," he had said. So now he watched her, and she watched him. Neither spoke for a while. The quiet between them was not empty. It was filled with thoughts neither fully trusted yet. "You should have told them," Obinna said, eventually breaking the silence. Zuriya didn't respond right away. Her fingers traced the edge of the lantern absent-mindedly. "Maybe," she said. "But you didn't." "No." Another pause. "Why?" he asked. Zuriya looked up at him then. Her expression wasn't defensive. It was tired. "Because I've seen what happens when people trust the wrong person," she said simply. Obinna held her gaze. "That's a risk everywhere," he replied. "Not like here," she said quietly. Her voice carried something deeper now, something lived. "Here, one mistake doesn't just hurt you," she continued. "It takes everything." Obinna didn't argue, because something in the way she said it told him she wasn't speaking in theory. He leaned back slightly, his body protesting the movement. "Where I come from," he said slowly, "trust is calculated." Zuriya tilted her head slightly. "Calculated?" "Yes," he said. "Measured, tested, earned." She frowned faintly. "That sounds lonely." Obinna almost smiled again. "Almost. It is." Silence returned, but this time it was softer, less guarded. Outside footsteps moved quietly across the wooden walkways. Not hurried, not loud, but deliberate. Zuriya noticed immediately. Her body stiffened. Obinna saw it. "What is it?" he asked. She didn't answer. She stood slowly, her movements careful, controlled. Then she moved toward the curtain, stopping just short of pulling it aside. Listening. The footsteps stopped, right outside. A shadow passed across the thin fabric. Zuriya's heart began to pound. "Zuriya." The voice was low, familiar. Zuriya's stomach tightened. "Mama Bissi." "Zuriya," the woman called again, louder this time. "I know you're inside." Obinna straightened slightly, his expression sharpening. Zuriya turned to him quickly. "Don't speak," she whispered. Then she stepped forward and pulled the curtain aside. Mama Bissi stood there, her eyes scanning quickly before settling on Zuriya. "I was wondering when you would come back," she said, her tone deceptively calm. Zuriya stepped outside, letting the curtain fall behind her. "What do you want?" she asked. Mama Bissi smiled. Slow, measured. "What I always want," she replied. "My money." Zuriya crossed her arms slightly. "I told you I need more time." "Yes," Mama Bissi said. "You did." Her eyes shifted briefly toward the shack, then back. "But it seems like your situation has changed." Zuriya's chest tightened. "I don't know what you mean." Mama Bissi's smile widened slightly. "No," she said softly. "Because I saw the men today." A pause. "They were looking for someone important." Zuriya said nothing. "And I saw how they looked at you," Mama Bissi continued. "Like you knew something." Zuriya's voice remained steady. I don't. Mama Bisi stepped closer. Close enough that Zuriya could smell the faint scent of perfume mixed with something sharper. You're a bad liar, she said quietly. Zuriya didn't move, didn't react. Mama Bisi studied her face, then laughed softly. It's all right, she said. You don't have to tell me. Zuriya's eyes narrowed slightly. Then why are you here? The older woman tilted her head. Because she said if you are hiding something valuable, I deserve a share. Zuriya felt something cold settle in her chest. There's nothing here, she said firmly. Mama Bisi's expression changed, just slightly, enough to show she didn't believe a word. We'll see, she said. Then she turned and walked away, but not before adding, You should be careful, Zuriya. Secrets don't stay hidden in places like this. Zuriya stood there for a long moment after she left, her hands clenched tightly at her sides, her mind racing. This was bad, worse than she had expected, because Mama Bisi wasn't just curious, she was dangerous. When Zuriya stepped back inside, Obinna was already watching her. That didn't sound like a friendly conversation, he said. Zuriya shook her head. It wasn't. She moved back to her place, sitting down slowly. She knows, she added, knows what not everything Zuriya said, but enough to ask questions. Obinna's expression darkened slightly. That's a problem. Yes. Silence. Then we should leave, he said. Zuriya looked at him immediately. Leave. Yes, Obinna said. This place isn't safe anymore. Zuriya almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how simple he made it sound. Leave and go where she asked. Obinna opened his mouth, then stopped, because the answer that would have come before didn't exist here, not yet. Zuriya saw it, the realization. You don't even know where to go, she said softly. Obinna didn't respond, because she was right. Outside the night deepened, the shadows grew longer, and somewhere in those shadows Mama Bisi wasn't done. She stood in a small gathering of men speaking in low tones. One of them held a phone. Another leaned closer, listening carefully. There's something in that shack, she said quietly. Are you sure? One of the men asked. Mama Bisi's eyes hardened. I know what I saw. A pause. Then, and if it's who I think it is. Her voice dropped even lower. Then we're about to make a lot of money. The men exchanged glances. Interested. Dangerous. Back inside the shack, Zuriya sat in silence. Her mind refused to rest. Something was coming. She could feel it. And for the first time since she had pulled him from the river, she wasn't sure she could protect him anymore. Obinna watched her. You regret it? He asked quietly. She looked up. Regret what's saving me? Zuriya held his gaze for a long moment. Then she shook her head. No. Her answer came without hesitation, without doubt. I just didn't know what would come after. Obinna nodded slowly. Neither did he. But now, they were both inside it, and there was no turning back. The night stretched longer than it should have. Zuriya did not sleep. She sat near the doorway, her body still her senses, alert to every sound that passed through Makoko. The wooden walkways creaked under distant footsteps. Voices drifted in and out, some familiar, some not. Every shadow felt heavier now, every movement sharper. Something was coming. She didn't know when, but she knew it would. Behind her, Obinna rested against the wall. He wasn't asleep either. His body still demanded rest, but his mind refused to surrender. Too much had returned. Too many fragments had begun to connect. The plane, the message, the explosion. This wasn't an accident. And if that was true, then whoever wanted him gone might still be looking. His gaze shifted to Zuriya. She hadn't moved in a long time. "You should rest," he said quietly. She didn't turn. "I can't. You won't be able to help anyone if you collapse," he added. That made her glance back. Her expression was calm but tired in a way that ran deeper than exhaustion. "I've been tired for a long time," she said. Obinna held her gaze. There was no complaint in her voice, no bitterness, just truth. And somehow, that made it heavier. The hours passed slowly. Then a sound. Not distant this time. Close. Too close. Zuriya's body stiffened instantly. Footsteps, multiple, approaching fast. Her heart began to pound. "Stay quiet," she whispered urgently. Obinna straightened slightly, his muscles tightening despite the pain. The footsteps stopped right outside. Then a hard knock. Not a request, a demand. "Zuriya," a voice called. Not Mama Bisi, someone else. Male, rough. "We know you're inside. Open the door." Zuriya didn't move. Her eyes locked with Obinna's. This was it. The moment she had felt coming. "Open it!" the voice repeated louder now. "Or we'll open it for you." Kelechi stirred behind them, confused. "Sister!" Zuriya turned quickly, placing a finger to her lips. "Stay quiet," she whispered. Another knock. Harder. The wood shook. Obinna's jaw tightened. "They're not here to talk," he said. Zuriya knew that. She stood slowly, every movement careful, every breath controlled. Then she stepped toward the door and opened it. 3 men stood outside. Not the ones from before. These were different. Rougher, hungrier. Their eyes scanned her quickly, then moved past her into the shack. Searching. "Where is he?" One of them asked immediately. Zuriya frowned. "Who?" The man stepped forward, pushing the door wider. "Don't play games," he said. "We know you pulled someone from that river." Zuriya's pulse raced, but her face remained steady. "You heard wrong," she replied. A laugh. Short, sharp. "Did we?" Another man said. Behind them, Mama Bisi appeared, her expression calm. Satisfied. "I told you," she said softly. "She's hiding something." Zuriya's chest tightened. Of course, she had told them. "You shouldn't have done that," Zuriya said quietly. Mama Bisi shrugged. "You shouldn't have lied." The first man stepped fully inside now, his eyes adjusted quickly to the dim light. Then he saw him, Obinna, sitting against the wall, weak but unmistakably there. A slow smile spread across the man's face. "Well," he said, "look what we have here." Zuriya moved instantly, stepping between them. "You're not taking him," she said. The man laughed again. "And you're going to stop us?" Zuriya didn't answer. She just stood there, firm, unmoving. The man's smile faded slightly. "Move," he said. "No." A pause. Then he reached forward. Zuriya reacted before thinking. She shoved his arm away, hard. The room froze. For a second, no one moved. Then the man's expression changed. Completely. "You just made a mistake," he said quietly. He raised his hand and struck her. The sound cracked through the small space. Zuriya stumbled back, hitting the wall. Pain exploded across her face. Kelechi cried out. Sister Obinna surged forward instinctively, but his body failed him. He collapsed to one knee breath, catching sharply. "Leave her alone," he shouted. The men turned toward him. Interest sharpened. "Oh, he can talk," one of them said. "Good," another added. "That makes this easier." Zuriya pushed herself up, ignoring the pain, stepping forward again. "Don't touch him," she said, her voice shaking but strong. The first man shook his head slowly. "You still don't understand," he said. "This isn't about you." Zuriya met his eyes. "It is now." Silence. Then a sudden movement. The man grabbed her arm and shoved her aside. Hard. She hit the ground, breath knocked from her chest. Kelechi screamed. "Stop," But no one listened. Two of the men moved toward Obinna. He tried to stand, failed. They grabbed him anyway, rough, unforgiving. "Let go of me." Obinna snapped, struggling despite his weakness. "Relax," one of them said. "You're worth more alive." Zuriya's heart dropped. Worth. They knew exactly who he was. "Please," she shouted, scrambling forward. "Don't take him, he's hurt, he needs." "Stay down," the first man said coldly. She didn't. She lunged forward again, and this time he pushed her harder. She hit the wooden floor pane, shooting through her body. Everything spun for a moment, then steadied, just enough for her to see. They were dragging him, toward the door, away. "No!" she whispered. Her voice broke. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. Obinna looked back. Their eyes met. For a split second, everything else disappeared. The noise, the struggle, the fear. Just that moment. "You should have told them," he said quietly. Zuriya shook her head, weakly. "No." But it was too late. They pulled him outside. Gone. Just like that. The shack fell silent, heavy, empty. Zuriya stayed on the floor. Her body refused to move, her chest tight, her breath uneven. Kelechi crawled toward her, his small hands shaking. "Sister?" She didn't respond, not at first, because something inside her had just broken. Not loudly, not completely, but enough. Enough to leave a hollow space where something had been. Trust. Hope. Maybe both. Outside, the night swallowed the men quickly. Their footsteps faded, their voices disappeared, and with them, so did the man she had pulled from death. Zuriya slowly pushed herself up. Her body protested. Her face throbbed, her hands trembled, but she stood anyway. Because she had to, because sitting there wouldn't bring him back, because something inside her still refused to give up. She stepped outside. The night air hit her face, cold, sharp, real. Her eyes scanned the darkness. Nothing. They were gone, but not lost. Not yet. Zuriya clenched her fists. "They think they can just take him," she whispered. Kelechi stood behind her, small and afraid. "Sister, what are you going to do?" Zuriya didn't answer immediately. Her gaze remained fixed ahead, focused, determined. "Then finally I'm going to get him back." Her voice was quiet, but there was something in it now, something stronger than before. Not just survival, not just hope, but resolve. Because this time she wasn't just protecting someone. She was fighting for him. Zuriya did not wait for morning. The moment the last echo of footsteps disappeared into the night, something inside her shifted, hard-focused, unyielding. The pain in her cheek pulsed with every heartbeat. Her body still weak from exhaustion, but none of it mattered now. They had taken him, and she was not going to let that be the end. "Kelechi," she said, turning back into the shack. Her voice was steady again. Different. "I need you to stay inside." Kelechi's eyes were wide, still filled with fear. "Where are you going?" Zuriya hesitated, then knelt in front of him, placing both hands gently on his shoulders. "I'm going to bring him back." "But those men," he began. "I know," she said softly. "I know they're dangerous." "Then don't go," he whispered. "Please." Zuriya's heart tightened. For a moment, just a moment, she wanted to listen. To stay, to choose safety for once. But she couldn't. "Not this time. He didn't leave me," she said quietly, even when he didn't know who he was. He stayed. Kelechi frowned slightly. He couldn't walk. Zuriya almost smiled. "Maybe," she said. "But I still won't leave him." She stood slowly. "I'll come back," she added. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone." Kelechi nodded, though his fear didn't fade. Zuriya stepped outside. The night wrapped around her instantly. Dark, unforgiving. But she stepped forward anyway. Makoko was different at night, quieter but not safer. Shadows stretched longer across the wooden walkways. Voices dropped to whispers. Movements became more careful, more hidden. Zuriya moved quickly, her bare feet silent against the planks. She didn't know exactly where they had taken him, but she knew one thing. People like those men didn't move without purpose, and purpose always left traces. Her first stop was the edge of the market. A few vendors still lingered, packing up what remained of their goods. Among them was old Sani, a thin man who had lived in Makoko longer than anyone could remember. If anyone had seen something, it would be him. Sani. Zuriya called softly. The old man looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly before recognizing her. "Zuriya," he said. "You should not be out at this hour. I need your help," she replied quickly. "Did you see the men who came earlier, the ones who took someone from my home?" Sani's expression changed. He glanced around before stepping closer. "I saw them," he said quietly. Zuriya's heart raced. "Where did they go?" Sani hesitated. "That is not a path you want to follow," he said. "I don't have a choice." He studied her face, the bruising, the determination, the fear she refused to show. Then he sighed. "They went toward the old dock," he said. "Near the abandoned warehouses." Zuriya nodded immediately. "Thank you." Zuriya. Sani added, his voice firm. "Men like that, they don't take people for nothing. I know." And sometimes, he continued, "they don't bring them back." Zuriya met his gaze. "They will this time." She turned before he could respond. The path to the old dock was narrow and poorly lit. The wooden walkways gave way to uneven ground, patches of mud and broken debris scattered along the way. The smell of the river grew stronger, mixed now with something else, oil, rust, decay. Zuriya moved carefully, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. Every sound felt louder here, every step more dangerous. But she didn't slow down. The abandoned warehouses came into view slowly. Dark shapes against a darker sky. Silent, but not empty. Zuriya could feel it. She crouched slightly, moving closer along the side of a broken wall. Then voices, low, muffled, but there. She edged closer, her heart pounding. A faint light flickered from inside one of the buildings. Careful, slow. She reached a crack in the wall and looked through. Inside, the space was dimly lit by a single hanging bulb. Shadows stretched across the concrete floor. And there they were. The men. 3 of them stood near a table, speaking in low voices. And in the center of the room, Obinna, tied to a chair, his head tilted slightly forward, his body still weak but awake. Alive. Relief hit Zuriya so suddenly, it almost made her gasp. But she held it in, stayed silent, listened. "You're worth more than I expected," one of the men said. Obinna didn't respond. His expression was calm but tense. "Your people are already looking for you," another added. "Big men, important men, still nothing. Then you're going to make us very rich." Zuriya's chest tightened. Money. Of course. This was about money. Everything here always was. "Who sent you?" Obinna asked suddenly. His voice was steady now, stronger. The men exchanged glances. Then one of them laughed. "You think we work for someone," he said. Obinna's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're not organized enough to do this on your own." The man's smile faded. "You don't get to ask questions," he said sharply. Obinna leaned back slightly, ignoring the ropes that held him. "Then you're making a mistake," he said calmly. A pause. Then, "What mistake?" the man asked. Obinna met his eyes. "You're playing a game you don't understand." Silence filled the room, tense, uncomfortable, because something in his tone was not fear. Outside, Zuriya watched everything. Her mind raced. 3 men, armed, alert. She had nothing, no weapon, no plan, no backup, just herself, and the decision she had already made. She stepped back slowly, her heart pounding. Think. There had to be a way, a distraction, something. Her eyes scanned the area. Then she saw it. A rusted fuel container near the side of the building, half open, the smell of gasoline, faint but unmistakable. Zuriya's breath slowed. Her mind sharpened. Dangerous, but possible. She moved quietly, carefully lifting the container. It was heavier than she expected, but manageable. Slowly, she carried it toward the back of the warehouse. Every step calculated, every movement controlled. Then she stopped, positioned it, took a breath, and pushed. The container tipped. Fuel spilled across the ground, spreading quickly. The smell intensified. Inside, one of the men paused. "Do you smell that?" he asked. Another frowned. What then fire? A sudden burst of flames ignited along the spilled fuel, racing across the ground toward the building. "Fire," someone shouted. Chaos erupted instantly. The men turned distracted, shouting orders. "Get water! Move! Watch the door!" Zuriya didn't wait. She moved, fast, silent, slipping through the side entrance while their attention was elsewhere. Inside, the smoke began to build. The light flickered. Confusion spread. Zuriya reached him in seconds. Zuriya Obinna's voice was filled with shock. "Don't talk," she whispered, already working at the ropes. "We have to go. How did you?" Later. The knots were tight. Her fingers moved quickly, desperately. Behind them, the men shouted again. "They're inside!" "Check the back." Zuriya's hands slipped. Then the rope gave. "Stand," she said urgently. Obinna tried. His legs faltered. Zuriya caught him immediately. "Lean on me." They moved, fast as they could, toward the exit. Smoke thickened, heat rising, voices closing in. "Stop them." A shout. Footsteps closer. Zuriya's heart pounded. Almost there. Almost. They burst through the doorway into the night air. Fresh, cold, free, but not safe. Not yet. Behind them, the men emerged, shouting, furious. "They're running." Zuriya tightened her grip on Obinna. "Keep moving," she said. Her voice was steady. Even now, even here. Because she had made her choice. And she wasn't turning back. They ran, but not fast enough. Zuriya could feel it in the rhythm of Obinna's steps, in the way his weight leaned heavier against her with every second. His body was still recovering, still fragile, still fighting just to keep moving. Every step he took cost him more than he showed. Behind them, the shouting grew louder, closer. "They're heading toward the docks," one of the men yelled. "Cut them off!" Zuriya's pulse hammered in her ears. Think. She couldn't outrun them. Not like this. Not with him barely able to stand. She needed something else. "This way," she whispered urgently, pulling him toward a narrow path between two broken structures. Obinna didn't argue. He trusted her. Not because it made sense, but because she had already proven something far stronger than logic. She didn't leave. The path was uneven, scattered with debris and patches of mud that threatened to pull their feet down with every step. The darkness wrapped tightly around them, broken only by faint light from distant lanterns, and the glow of fire still flickering behind them. Zuriya moved carefully, her eyes scanning ahead. There. A small half-collapsed storage shed. Barely standing, barely visible, but enough. "Inside," she said. They slipped in, just as footsteps thundered past the entrance. Zuriya held her breath. Obinna leaned heavily against the wall, his chest rising and falling sharply as he struggled to control his breathing. Outside, the men paused. Where did they go? They were right here, split up. Silence followed. Then footsteps moved in different directions. Searching. Zuriya didn't move, didn't speak. She could feel Obinna's breath near her shoulder. Too loud, too fast. She reached for his hand instinctively, squeezing gently. "Slow," she whispered. "Breathe, slowly." He nodded, faintly. Tried, forced himself to match her rhythm. In, out, in, out. Gradually, the sound softened. Just enough. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time felt uncertain here. Eventually, the footsteps faded. The voices grew distant, then disappeared. Zuriya exhaled slowly. "We can't stay here," she said. Obinna nodded. "I know." He straightened slightly, pushing himself away from the wall. Pain flickered across his face, but he hid it quickly. "We need to get somewhere safe," he added. Zuriya looked at him. "For you, or for both of us, Edi?" A pause. "Both," he said. They stepped back out into the night. This time, more carefully, more quietly. Zuriya led the way, choosing paths that twisted and turned through the less crowded parts of Makoko places, where people didn't ask questions, where shadows offered more protection than danger. But something had changed. The danger was no longer just around them. It was following them. "You said your name is Obinna," Zuriya said softly as they walked. "Yes. And those men, they knew who you were." "Yes." She glanced at him. "So this isn't over." "No," he said. "It's just beginning." They reached the edge of the settlement, where the wooden structures thinned out and gave way to firmer ground. Zuriya slowed. "This is as far as I usually go," she said. Obinna looked ahead. Beyond Makoko, the city stretched outward, lights, roads, buildings that belonged to a different world entirely. A world he knew, or at least, one he was beginning to remember again. "We can't go back to your place," he said. Zuriya nodded. "I know. They'll return," he added. "They already have," she replied. A faint silence settled between them. "Then I have somewhere we can go," Obinna said. Zuriya looked at him sharply. "You said you didn't remember." "I didn't," he said. "Not everything." But now he nodded slowly. "Enough." They moved again, this time toward the city. Each step carried them further from the life Zuriya knew, further from the only world she had ever belonged to. By the time they reached the roadside, the night had begun to thin. A few vehicles passed occasionally, headlights cutting through the darkness, engines humming with distant indifference. Zuriya had never stood here this late, never watched the city like this. It felt different, bigger, colder. "Wait here," Obinna said. She frowned. "Where are you going? I need to find a way to contact someone." Zuriya hesitated. "You think they'll help you?" Obinna met her eyes. "They work for me." A pause. "And you trust them?" Another pause. "Then I don't know," he admitted. Zuriya crossed her arms slightly. "Then be careful." He nodded once, then stepped toward the road, raising his hand as a car approached. The vehicle slowed, then stopped. The driver rolled down the window, his expression cautious. Obinna leaned slightly closer. "I need a phone," he said. The driver frowned. "Who are you?" Obinna hesitated. For a split second, uncertainty flickered. Then, "My name is Obinna Adeyemi." The man froze. Recognition hit instantly. His eyes widened. "What I don't have time to explain," Obinna said firmly. "I need your phone." The driver handed it over without another word. Zuriya watched from a distance. Her heart beat faster. This was it. The moment everything would change. For him. For her. For everything. Obinna dialed a number. His hand remained steady, but his eyes sharpened. The line rang once, twice. Then a voice answered. "Hello." Obinna inhaled slowly. "It's me." Silence. Then, surrelief. Shock. Disbelief. "It's me," Obinna repeated. "Where are you?" the voice asked urgently. Alive, Obinna said. But not safe. A pause. Then we've been searching everywhere, the voice said. We thought I know, Obinna cut in. Listen carefully. His tone changed. Stronger. Commanding. Familiar. Zuriya noticed it immediately. This was not the man she had cared for in her shack. This was someone else. Someone powerful. Send a team, Obinna continued. Discreet. No noise, no attention. Yes, sir. And listen. He added, his voice lowering. Do not trust anyone outside the inner circle. A pause. Understood. I'll send the location, Obinna said. Then he ended the call. He stood there for a moment, still, silent. Then he turned back toward Zuriya. She watched him approach, her expression unreadable. You remembered, she said. Yes, and they're coming. Yes. Another pause. Zuriya nodded slowly. Then everything changes now. Obinna stopped in front of her. Yes, he said. It does. Far in the distance, the sound of engines began to rise. Low, deep, approaching. Zuriya turned her head slightly, her eyes narrowing. What is that? She asked. Obinna followed her gaze, and for the first time, a faint smile appeared. Help, he said. The road remained empty for a few seconds longer. Then headlights appeared. 1, then 2, then 5. Black vehicles, moving in perfect formation. Silent, precise, powerful. Zuriya's breath caught. They slowed as they approached, then stopped, right in front of them. The doors opened. Men stepped out, well-dressed, composed, alert. Different from the ones before, these were not desperate. These were controlled, loyal, dangerous in a different way. One of them stepped forward, his eyes locked onto Obinna, and for a brief moment, emotion broke through his professionalism. Sir, Obinna nodded once. I'm fine. The man exhaled relief clear. Then his gaze shifted to Zuriya. Curious, assessing, respectful. Who is she? He asked. Obinna didn't hesitate. The reason I'm alive. Zuriya stood still. 5 black Cadillacs, engines humming, men waiting, and suddenly, the world she knew felt very far away. The engines didn't turn off immediately. They idled, low-controlled, powerful, like everything about the men who had arrived. The 5 black Cadillacs stood in a perfect line along the quiet roadside, their polished surfaces reflecting the early light of dawn. Zuriya had never seen anything like it. Not up close, not like this. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't speak. She simply stood there, her bare feet still dusty from the road, her clothes worn and stained her face, marked by exhaustion and the bruise from the night before. And in front of her, a world she had never belonged to. The man who had stepped forward tall, composed his suit crisp despite the early hour, kept his eyes on Obinna. Sir, we need to move, he said firmly. It's not safe to stay here. Obinna nodded slightly. I know. Then he turned to Zuriya. Come with us. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Zuriya blinked. Come. With you, she repeated. Yes. She hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the cars, then back to him. This is your world, she said quietly. Not mine. Obinna stepped closer. It doesn't matter, he replied. You saved my life. Zuriya shook her head slightly. That doesn't change where I belong. It changes everything, he said. Silence settled between them, heavy, uncertain. Behind Obinna, the men waited patiently, but alert. Their eyes scanned the surroundings, their posture, ready for movement at any second. Time was limited. Zuriya felt it. The pressure, the pull between two choices. Stay, or step into something unknown. Kelechi, she said suddenly. Obinna frowned. What, my brother? She continued. He's still in Makoko. A pause. Then understanding. We'll bring him, Obinna said immediately. Zuriya looked at him carefully. "You don't know what that means," she said. "He's sick. He needs care. Real care." Obinna didn't hesitate. "Then he'll get it." Her eyes searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for anything that suggested he didn't understand the weight of what he was offering. But there was none, only certainty. So the man in the suit interrupted gently. "We really need to leave." Obinna nodded once, then turned back to Zuriya. "Decide," he said quietly. Zuriya inhaled slowly. Her heart pounded not from fear but from something deeper. Change. Real change. The kind that didn't come often. The kind that didn't wait. She looked back toward Makoko, toward the life she had known. The shack, the narrow walkways, the struggle, the pain, and Kelechi. Always Kelechi. Then she looked at Obinna, the man she had pulled from the river, the man who now stood between two worlds, one she knew and one she didn't. "You're not leaving without me," she said. Obinna nodded. "Good." The ride back to Makoko was silent. The Cadillacs moved smoothly, cutting through the early morning streets with quiet authority. People turned to look as they passed, confused, curious, some even stopping mid-step. Vehicles like these didn't come here, not unless something important was happening. Zuriya sat in the back seat, her hands resting tightly in her lap. The leather beneath her felt unfamiliar, too soft, too clean. She glanced out the window, watching the city shift as they moved buildings, rising higher roads, widening people, changing. Everything felt distant, unreal. Across from her, Obinna sat quietly, watching her. "You don't trust this," he said. Zuriya didn't look at him. "I don't understand it," she replied. "That's not the same thing." "No," she said softly. "But it feels the same." When they reached Makoko, the reaction was immediate. People stopped, stared, whispered. 5 black Cadillacs rolling into the heart of the settlement was not something that could go unnoticed. Children ran alongside the cars. Adults stepped aside, their eyes wide with disbelief. Zuriya felt every gaze, every question, every judgment. The cars stopped near her shack. Before the doors fully opened, Kelechi had already stepped outside. His small face lit up the moment he saw her. "Sister." He ran forward, wrapping his arms around her tightly. Zuriya held him just as tight. "I'm here," she whispered. "I told you I'd come back." Kelechi pulled back slightly, his eyes moving past her to the cars, to the men, to Obinna. "What is all this?" he asked. Zuriya smiled faintly. "A long story." Obinna stepped forward slowly. Kelechi looked at him carefully. "You're better," the boy said. Obinna nodded. "Because of your sister." Kelechi smiled proudly. "I told you she's strong." Something in Obinna's expression softened. "I believe that." The man in the suit approached again. "Sir, we need to move," he repeated. Obinna turned to Zuriya. "Get what you need." She nodded, but when she stepped inside the shack, she paused. Everything was still there. The mat, the small box, the worn walls that had held her life together for so long. She walked slowly to the corner and opened the box. Inside, almost nothing, except the empty space where the bracelet had been. She stared at it for a moment, then closed the lid. There was nothing here she needed, not anymore. When she stepped back outside, Kelechi stood beside Obinna, holding his hand lightly. Zuriya stopped for a second. Watching them, something in her chest shifted. Quiet, unexpected. Then she walked forward. "I'm ready," she said. As they got into the cars, the whispers around them grew louder. "Where are they going? Who is that man? What did Zuriya do?" Mama Bisi stood at a distance, her face tight with something she couldn't hide anymore. Regret, or maybe something else. She had tried to profit from the secret. But now, The secret was gone, and so was the opportunity. The doors closed, the engines rose, and slowly, the 5 black Cadillacs pulled away, leaving Makoko behind. Inside the car, Kelechi leaned against Zuriya, his small body finally relaxing. "Are we going somewhere better?" he asked softly. Zuriya looked out the window, at the life she was leaving, then at the road ahead. "Yes," she said, "I think we are." Obinna watched her. There was something different now, not just in her situation, but in her. Strength, still there, but something else too. Possibility. And he realized this wasn't just about saving her life, or repaying a debt. This was about something bigger, something neither of them fully understood yet. As the city opened up before them, the distance between 2 worlds grew wider. But for the first time, Zuriya wasn't standing on the outside of it. She was moving into it, and, somewhere far behind them, the men who had tried to take Obinna were not finished. Not yet, because losing him was not something they could afford, and now they knew exactly who had taken him back. The gates opened before the cars even stopped. Tall, black, silent. They slid apart with mechanical precision, revealing a driveway that curved through perfectly trimmed lawns toward a mansion that did not look real. At least not to Zuriya. She stared through the window as the first Cadillac rolled forward, her breath, slowing her thoughts, unable to keep up with what she was seeing. The house stood wide and elegant, its glass windows catching the early sunlight, its structure clean and powerful in a way that felt distant, untouchable. This was not just wealth. This was a different world. Kelechi pressed his face lightly against the window. "Is this where we're staying?" he whispered. Zuriya didn't answer immediately, because she didn't know, not really. Obinna sat beside them, quiet, composed, but something about him had shifted again. The moment they passed through those gates, he belonged here, and it showed. The cars stopped in front of the entrance. The doors opened. Staff members appeared almost instantly, lined, organized, efficient. Some bowed slightly, others stepped forward with careful respect. "Welcome back, sir," one of them said. Obinna nodded. "Thank you." Then he stepped out. Zuriya followed slowly, her feet touching the smooth stone driveway. Clean, cold, nothing like the rough splintered wood she was used to. Kelechi stayed close to her side, his small hand gripping hers tightly. People were watching them, not openly, not rudely, but enough. Zuriya felt it. Every glance, every quiet judgment. So the man in the suit said, stepping forward again. "We've prepared everything. The medical team is inside." Zuriya's attention snapped to him. "Medical?" she asked. Obinna looked at her. "For Kelechi." Her heart skipped. "You already knew I saw him," Obinna said simply. "I don't ignore things like that." Zuriya swallowed. Something tightened in her chest. Not fear, not uncertainty. Something else. Something softer. Inside the house was even more overwhelming. Wide spaces, high ceilings, light everywhere. Zuriya slowed her steps without realizing it. Her eyes taking in everything, the polished floors, the quiet order, the absence of struggle in every detail. Kelechi clung to her side. "Sister," he whispered. "This place is too big." Zuriya squeezed his hand gently. "It's okay," she said, even if she wasn't sure it was. The medical team met them in a quiet room, filled with equipment Zuriya didn't recognize. "Please," one of the doctors said gently. "Bring the boy." Zuriya hesitated. Instinct, protection. Then she looked at Obinna. He nodded once. "They'll take care of him." Zuriya exhaled slowly, then guided Kelechi forward. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm right here." As the doctors began their work, Zuriya stepped back. Her eyes never left her brother. Every movement, every sound, she watched it all. Because trusting them was not something that came easily. "He's in good hands," Obinna said quietly beside her. Zuriya didn't look at him. "I've heard that before," she replied. A pause. "But never like this," she added. Hours passed. Tests, examinations, quiet conversations between doctors. Zuriya remained in the same spot, her body still, her mind racing. Finally, one of the doctors approached. "Miss Zuriya." She turned immediately. "Yes," the doctor smiled gently. "He's going to be okay." Zuriya blinked. "What, he's been untreated for a while," the doctor continued. "But it's not too late. With proper care, he'll recover." The words hit her slowly. Then all at once, her knees almost gave out. He'll be okay," she repeated. "Yes." Zuriya covered her mouth, her breath catching. For a moment she couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't even think, because something she had carried for so long, fear, constant, heavy, unrelenting, had just lifted. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you." The doctor nodded, then stepped away. Zuriya turned toward Obinna. Her eyes filled not with tears falling, but with something deeper. Gratitude, real, unfiltered. "You did this," she said. Obinna shook his head slightly. "No," he replied. "You did." She frowned faintly. "I just brought him here. And I'm here because of you," he said. Silence. Then Zuriya nodded slowly. Later that day everything changed again. But not in the way she expected. Zuriya stood near the window, watching the city stretch beyond the walls of the estate. It looked different from here. Smaller, further away, like something she had already left behind. Behind her, voices echoed from another room. Sharp, tense. She turned. Obinna's voice. Stronger now, commanding. "I don't care what you thought happened," he was saying. "I'm alive. That should be enough." Another voice responded. Lower, controlled. "But it isn't, Obinna." Zuriya stepped closer. Careful, listening. Inside the room, 3 men stood across from him. Dressed like him, powerful, important, but not friendly. "You disappeared," one of them said. "Your company is exposed. Your deals are vulnerable. And someone tried to kill me," Obinna replied. A pause. "That's not confirmed," another man said. Obinna's eyes hardened. The plane didn't fall on its own. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Zuriya watched from the doorway. Something was wrong. She could feel it. This wasn't just business. This was something deeper. Something dangerous. "You need to be careful," the first man said. "Not everyone is who you think they are." Obinna laughed softly. "That's exactly what I've learned." Another pause. "Then and what about her?" one of them asked. Zuriya's body tensed. Their eyes shifted toward her. "She came with you," the man continued. "Who is she?" Obinna didn't hesitate. "She's the reason I'm alive." That doesn't answer the question. It answers enough. The tension rose, sharp, visible. Zuriya stepped forward. "I'm not part of this," she said quietly. The men looked at her, assessing, measuring, judging. Obinna turned slightly. "Yes," he said. "You are." Zuriya frowned. "No," she said. "I'm not." A pause. "Then someone tried to kill him," she added. "That makes me part of it, whether I want to be or not." Silence. One of the men nodded slowly. "She understands faster than most," he said. But not everyone agreed. Because in that moment, Zuriya was no longer invisible. No longer just a poor girl from Makoko. She was something else. Someone connected to Obinna. And that made her a target. Later that night, as the house quieted, Obinna stood alone in his office. The city lights stretched before him, endless, cold, calculated. Behind him, the door opened. Zuriya stepped in. "You're not safe here," she said. Obinna didn't turn. I know. They know you're alive. Yes. They'll come again. A pause. Yes. Zuriya stepped closer, then stopped. Then what do we do? Obinna finally turned. His expression was calm, but his eyes, sharp, focused, dangerous. We don't wait for them, he said. A pause. We find them first. And just like that, the fight changed. No longer survival, no longer escape, but something else, something stronger. They were no longer running, they were preparing. The house did not feel safe anymore. It looked the same, clean, controlled, untouched by the chaos outside its gates. But something had shifted beneath the surface. Conversations had become quieter, footsteps more deliberate, doors closed more often than they opened. Zuriya noticed everything, because she had learned to. In a world where survival depended on paying attention, she had never had the luxury of ignoring danger. Kelechi was resting. For the first time in weeks, his breathing had softened into something steady. The medication was working. The doctors came and went with quiet efficiency, their presence no longer intimidating, but reassuring. Zuriya stayed by his side for hours, watching, listening, making sure. Because even now, even here, she couldn't fully let go of the fear that something could still go wrong. You should rest, a nurse told her gently. Zuriya shook her head. I will, she said. Later. The nurse didn't argue. She simply nodded and stepped away. Across the house, Obinna was no longer the man Zuriya had met in her shack. Not entirely. That version of him still existed somewhere beneath the surface, but now something sharper had taken its place. Control, authority, purpose. He moved through rooms like he owned them. Because he did, and the people around him responded instantly. Yes, sir. Of course, sir. It's already done, sir. Zuriya watched from a distance. It was unsettling. Not because it was wrong, but because it was so different. You don't like it, Obinna said, appearing beside her. Zuriya didn't turn. I don't understand it, she replied. That again, he said. She finally looked at him. You're not the same person, she said quietly. Obinna held her gaze. I am. No, she said. You're not. A pause. You're stronger, she added. But also, further away, something in his expression shifted, briefly, then steadied. This is who I've always been, he said. Zuriya shook her head. No, she replied. This is who you had to be. Silence. Heavy. Honest. Before he could respond, a voice cut through the hallway. Sir, one of the men from earlier, his security team, approached quickly. We have a situation. Obinna's posture changed instantly. What is it? We traced the men from the docks, the man said. They're connected to Daramola. Zuriya felt the name hit like a weight. Chief Daramola, she asked. The man glanced at her briefly, then nodded. Yes. Obinna's eyes darkened. I knew it, he said. Zuriya frowned. Who is he? A businessman, Obinna replied. A dangerous one, the security man added. The room shifted. The air tightened. Because this was no longer guesswork, no longer suspicion. This was confirmation. Where is he? Obinna asked. We located one of his properties, the man said. Private compound, outside the city, and he's there. A pause. Then he's expecting you. Zuriya's chest tightened. Then it's a trap, she said immediately. Obinna looked at her. Yes. And you're still going? She asked. Another pause. Then yes. Zuriya stepped forward. That doesn't make sense, she said. If he tried to kill you once, he'll try again, Obinna finished. Exactly. And this time he said, his voice steady. I'll be ready. The decision was already made. Zuriya could see it. In the way he stood, in the way the others moved around him. There was no hesitation, No doubt. Only action. You're not going alone, she said. Obinna frowned slightly. Zuriya. I'm not staying here, she interrupted. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment they came into my home, she said. Silence, sharp, unavoidable. Obinna studied her, really studied her. And in that moment he understood something. This wasn't about gratitude, or loyalty, or debt. This was about who she was. And she wasn't the kind of person who stepped back. Fine, he said. Zuriya blinked. What, you're coming, he repeated. But you stay behind me. Zuriya almost smiled. We'll see. The drive was different this time. Not slow, not careful. The Cadillacs moved with purpose, now fast, controlled, deliberate. The city faded behind them quickly. Buildings gave way to open roads. Then to silence. Zuriya sat beside Obinna. Kelechi stayed behind, safe watched, protected. But her thoughts stayed with him. Always. You'll come back, she had told him. She had to believe that. Are you afraid? Obinna asked suddenly. Zuriya didn't answer immediately. Then yes, she said. Good, she frowned. Good, yes, he said. It means you understand what's at stake. Zuriya looked at him. And you, pause, not afraid, he said. Why another pause? Then because I've already lost everything, once he replied. Zuriya didn't ask what he meant, because something in his voice told her that wasn't a story for now. The compound appeared suddenly. Large, isolated, guarded, gates already open, waiting. That's not normal, Zuriya said. No, Obinna replied. It's not. The cars slowed, then stopped. The doors opened. Silence, heavy, controlled. They stepped out. Together. Zuriya felt the ground beneath her feet. Solid, still, but the air different, charged. The main doors opened slowly, and there he stood. Chief Daramola, tall, composed, smiling. Obinna, he said smoothly. I was wondering when you'd arrive. Obinna stepped forward, his expression unreadable. You should have finished the job, he said. Daramola chuckled. And miss this conversation, he replied. Never. Zuriya watched, her heart steady, her mind sharp. Because this was the moment everything had been leading to. You tried to kill me, Obinna said. Daramola shrugged slightly. I tried to stop you from what? Pause. Then from becoming something even more dangerous than you already are. Silence. You built your empire too fast, Daramola continued. Too clean, too controlled. And that threatened you. It threatened everyone, he said. Zuriya stepped forward slightly. And killing him. Fixes that she asked. Daramola's eyes shifted to her. Curious, amused, and you are Zuriya, didn't hesitate. The one who saved him. A pause. Then Daramola smiled. Ah, he said. The girl from the river. Everything slowed. Just for a second. Because now everyone knew. Everything. And now you stand here. Daramola said softly. In a place you don't belong. Zuriya met his gaze. I go where I need to. Silence. Then a laugh. Low. Dangerous. I like her, Daramola said. Then his expression changed. Completely. But this is where it ends. Movement. Fast. Sharp. Men stepped out from the shadows. Weapons raised, surrounding them. Zuriya's heart pounded. But she didn't move, didn't step back, didn't run. Because this time, there was nowhere left to go. Obinna stepped slightly in front of her. His voice calm, cold, final. You made one mistake, he said. Daramola tilted his head. Oh, you thought I came alone. And then from behind engines, more, louder, closer. The gates burst open. More vehicles, more men, more power. The balance shifted. Instantly. Daramola's smile faded. Just slightly, but enough. And for the first time, he realized he had miscalculated everything. The silence broke first, not with words, but with the unmistakable shift of power. The new vehicles that burst through the gates didn't slow, they claimed the space. Doors opened in quick succession, and men stepped out with disciplined precision, their movements synchronized, their eyes alert. These were not hired hands or desperate opportunists. They were loyal, and they were ready. Chief Daramola's compound, once controlled and calculated, now felt crowded with uncertainty. His men tightened their grip on their weapons. Obinna's men didn't raise theirs, not yet. But they didn't need to, because the message was already clear. "You always liked dramatic entrances," Daramola said lightly, though the edge in his voice betrayed him. Obinna stepped forward. "You always relied on theatrics instead of strategy," he replied. Zuriya stood just behind him, her breath steady, her eyes moving quickly, counting, measuring, understanding the danger that still lingered despite the shift. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. Daramola raised a hand slightly. His men hesitated, then lowered their weapons just a fraction. "Let's not turn this into something messy," he said calmly. Obinna didn't stop walking. "Messy," he repeated. "You tried to kill me?" "I tried to protect what I built," Daramola replied. "And you think murder is protection? I think survival is," Daramola said. Zuriya watched them. Two men, two worlds, clashing not just in power but in belief. And for the first time, she understood. This wasn't just about money. It was about control, about fear, about what people were willing to do to keep what they had. "You miscalculated," Obinna said. Daramola smiled faintly. "No," he replied. "I adapted." A pause. "Then I expected you to survive," he added. Zuriya's eyes narrowed. "You planned this?" she asked. Daramola turned to her. "I planned for possibilities," he said. "You were not one of them." Silence. "Then step aside," Obinna said. Daramola didn't move. "I don't think I will." The tension snapped. Fast, sharp, unforgiving. One of Daramola's men shifted, and that was enough. Obinna's team moved instantly, weapons raised, commands shouted. The compound exploded into controlled chaos. "Drop it. Hands where I can see them. Move." Zuriya's heart pounded. But she stayed where she was. She didn't run, didn't hide. Because this was the end, the moment everything had been building toward. Daramola's men hesitated, outnumbered, outmatched, and slowly, one by one, they lowered their weapons. Daramola exhaled softly, then raised his hands. "All right," he said. "You win." But Obinna didn't look satisfied. "Not yet." He stepped closer, close enough that only a few feet separated them. "You don't get to walk away from this," he said. Daramola tilted his head. "And what exactly are you going to do?" Before Obinna could answer, another sound filled the air. Sirens, distant, then closer. Police. Zuriya blinked. Obinna hadn't mentioned that. Daramola laughed. Soft, bitter. "You brought the law into this," he said. Obinna didn't respond, but the truth was clear. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about ending it. Properly. The gates opened again. This time uniforms, authority, finality. Officers moved in quickly, taking control of the scene. Daramola didn't resist. He simply stood there, his expression unreadable, as they placed him in handcuffs. As they led him away, he paused. Just once, and looked back. At Obinna, then at Zuriya. "You changed the game," he said quietly. Zuriya didn't answer. She didn't need to. The vehicles disappeared. The compound emptied, and just like that, it was over. The ride back was quiet. Not heavy, not tense. Just still. like something had finally settled. Back at the estate, the gates opened again. This time they felt different, not like a barrier, but like something welcoming. Kelechi ran toward them the moment they stepped out. Sister Zuriya knelt immediately, pulling him into her arms. "I told you I'd come back," she whispered. He smiled. "You always do." Obinna watched them. Something in his chest shifted, quiet, unfamiliar, but real. Days passed, then weeks, and slowly, life began to change. Kelechi grew stronger. Day by day, his laughter returned, his energy followed, and for the first time, he ran. Not far, not fast, but enough. Zuriya stayed. Not as a guest, not as someone passing through, but as someone who belonged. Though it took time, adjustment, understanding, because the world she had entered was still unfamiliar, still complex, still different. "You can leave, you know," Obinna said one evening. They stood on the balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly before them. Zuriya smiled faintly. "I know. You don't owe me anything. I know that too." A pause. "Then so why are you still here?" he asked. Zuriya looked out at the city, then back at him. "Because I want to be," she said. Silence. Then Obinna nodded. "I don't want you here because you saved me," he said. Zuriya tilted her head. "Then why?" A pause. Long, honest. "Because you see things differently," he said. "Because you don't walk away. Because you remind me of something I forgot." Zuriya studied him, then smiled. Soft, real. "And what is that?" she asked. Obinna held her gaze. For a long time he said quietly, "I thought power was everything." A pause. "But you showed me it's not." The city moved below them, unaware, unchanged. But for them, everything was different. Zuriya stepped closer. "Not far. Just enough." "You didn't need me to learn that," she said. Obinna shook his head. "Yes," he replied. "I did." And in that moment, there was no distance, no difference, no divide between worlds. Just two people who had found something real, in the middle of everything that wasn't. Sometimes the world teaches us to measure value by money, power, and status. It tells us that the strongest survive, that the richest win, and that kindness is a weakness. But stories like Zuriya's remind us of something deeper. True strength is not in what you have, but in what you choose to do when you have nothing. Zuriya had no wealth, no influence, no protection. Yet she made a choice that many others refused to make. She stepped forward when everyone else stepped back. She gave when she had nothing left to give. And in doing so, she changed not only her life, but someone else's completely. Obinna had power, he had control, but he had forgotten what it meant to feel, to trust, to care without calculation. It took someone from the very edge of survival to remind him of what truly matters. This story is not about luck, it's about courage. It's about choosing to do what is right even when it costs you everything. So now I want to ask you, what would you have done in Zuriya's place? Would you have walked away or stepped forward if this story touched you? Take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us of what it means to be human. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can change the biggest destinies.